Hey guys, this is Stan, and today we'll be going over discussion 1, and we'll be going over specifically sections 2.1 and sections 2.2. So in sections 2.2 you have transform ints, and in section 2.1 you have double ints, and you have square ints. And basically what we'll be doing is implementing these functions. So why don't we just jump right on in. I made this doc so that it pretty much is everything that your discussion sheet gives you, but in a Sublime file. So square is over here. So a square of x is returns x times x, and then double of x returns 2 times x. So that's pretty straightforward. So why don't we start implementing these other functions. Alright, so I think this is a good time to get started. So you can see here that the doc test has a description of what square int should do. So this is pretty much exactly what it says on the discussion sheet, so we're just based off this, so I don't have to jump back and forth between tabs. So it prints out the square of every integer from 1 to n. So I guess the example they have here for 3, 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, and 3 squared is 9. So it goes 1, 2, 3, and then it squares it. So let's do what it's asking. So it's saying to square every integer from 1 to n. It's kind of like iterating through the numbers. It goes from 1 to 2 to 3. If the n is 4, then it'll go to 4. So that kind of begs for a while loop, right? So while, let's say, integer is less than or equal to n. And the reason I'm doing less than and equal to is because I want to include the last number, just like how square ints of 3 returns 3, prints 3 squared, not returns. They're different. So iterate through the integers. Int integers from 1 to n. And what do we want our starting number to be? Well, we want the starting number to be 1, so let's instantiate our integer here. And I guess we can comment and say this is our starting point. So what does it want us to do? It wants us to print out a number, right? So we're eventually going to have to call the print function. And what does it want us to print? The square of every number. So how do we find the square? Well, luckily for us, they already defined the square function for us, so we can just call that. So it wants to print the square of an integer, so I'll be like, cool, I'll just give you that. I'll give you the square of an integer. So this does all the work for us, so it pretty much does the printing work and the squaring work. And the last thing that we have to do is go here, and we have to increment integer. But why? Why do we have to increment integer? Well, we need to increment integer because if we don't, and it just prints, then our integer will be 1 at the start of the while loop again. So go like this, and it'll be 1, and go like this, will be 1. It'll keep on printing 1, and it'll never stop. And we don't want something like an infinite loop. So we would like to increment 1 so that the next value of integer will be binded to 2, and then we'll get print of square of 2, and it will be 4. Then it will be print square of 3, and it'll be 3. And then when it's 3, it'll go up one more time to 4. 4 is not less than 3, so then it will exit out of the function. Alright, so let's just get started on the next part. Do some little bit of tidying up over here, and let's get started. So double ints pretty much does the exact same thing of square ints, right? Except that it doubles the numbers instead of squaring them. So why don't we do that? And I'm just gonna be like, wow, this is exactly the same. So I'm just gonna be a lazy person and be like, well, this is the answer, great, fantastic. Square. And then it does like the doubling work over here, and like no one can tell the difference, right? We're good. So let's just try to run through our example here to make sure it works. Integer is equal to 1. While 1 is less than n, you just print the double of that. integer plus 1 goes to 2, doubles that to get 4, plus 1 gets 3, doubles that gets 6, and then it becomes 4 over here, and then it stops, and we're fantastic. So you're might be like, Stan, you're just cheating. You're just like copying and pasting your code from above. And yeah, you're right. I pretty much am cheating, right? I'm pretty much just looking at here and I'm manipulating it a little and changing the square to a double and then like changing my comment here. So it's like I'm super sly. No one's figuring out what I'm doing. So why would I do something like that? Why am I allowed to do something like this? Well, we'll answer this in the next question. But right now you should be pretty skeptical of what I'm doing. It's like, why? You're kind of avoiding the work. So I guess I'll move on from there. So pretty much I just copy and pasted the code from Square and then I put it here and I changed a little bit of stuff and yep, boom, it works great, fantastic. But why am I copy and pasting? Copy and pasting, it just seems like a bad thing to do, right? It seems like I'm not doing anything. So that just kind of gives a little insight on why defining these two functions weren't exactly the best idea. So we're going to move on from there and try to do transform ints. So this is very similar to double ints and square ints, except it's a more generalized version of it. So it prints out all the integers from 1 to n, just like double and square, with func applied to them. So if you look at here, transform ints of square of 3, it iterates through the values between 1 and n, so 1, 2, 3, and it just squares them. So let's try to do that. So again, we would like our starting point to equal to 1. Starting. And then we would also like to do while integer. And you can see right now that it's already really similar to what's above. And we would like to print something, right? But what would we like to do? Well, in our case over here, we're given a function. So we could just do print func of integer. And what does this do? This just applies the function to integer, just like how we applied double to integer and how we applied square to integer. So this is basically doing the same thing. An integer plus or equal to 1. And we would like to do this for the same reasons as above. We would like to iterate through the numbers from 1, 2, and 3. And we would like to keep going instead of stopping at 1 and being stuck in an infinite loop forever. So as you can see, all these functions that I've implemented, they all look eerily similar. They're like the same thing, pretty much. But the difference is that this transform ints function, it takes in a function and I guess you could say the range of a number, because it goes from 1 to that number. And it's a lot more general. So what I want to emphasize here is that if you want to implement a bunch of functions like this, maybe you want to implement a function like double ints and square ints. Instead of doing that, you could just make a function like this, like transform ints. And I'll demonstrate that to you guys now. So let's say I saved my file and I opened up my interpreter. Like this. So open the interactive section. So if I run transform, let's say I run square ints of 3, I would get this. But if I just do a more generalized function like transform ints, and I could just put the square in here, then it would do the same thing. So the importance in here is that I only need to write one function. It's transform ints function that will do the work of square ints and double ints for me, because it is more generalized. And I hope this was helpful, and I hope you kind of found that copy and pasting is a little sketch. So it would have been better if in the beginning we just implemented transform ints instead of implementing those two specific cases of square ints and double ints. So yeah, good luck coding, and yeah.